All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the San Anselmo Library's virtual program today, Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia. I'm Sariana, the Adult Services Librarian at the San Anselmo Public Library. And before we begin, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library and the Library Parcel Tax for sponsoring this program and all of our library programs. Everyone will remain muted until the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box and we will answer questions at the end of each segment, as well as the end of the presentation. Technology can be very fickle, and I want to thank you all in advance for your patience and understanding during this program. We are recording this program today, and I'll send a link out to everyone who's registered either later today or early tomorrow. Our speaker today is Dr. Deepa Bhaumik. Dr. Bhaumik is a staff scientist and lab manager at the Buck Institute and completed her PhD in biochemistry at the University of Calcutta, India. She's held fellowships at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Stanford University, and the University of Pennsylvania. Deepa's primary job is to manage Gordon Lithgow's lab at the Buck and assist in the research of other lab members. She also has her own research projects on aging and neurodegeneration. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Deepa Bhaumik.
All right, thank you, Sariana, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session on understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. I think if some of you have been to my session on the healthy living for your brain and body. So as Sariana mentioned, I am a researcher, a scientist at the Buck Institute for Aging Research in Novato. And this is where we focus actually on primarily all aging and age-related diseases. And when I talked about healthy living for your brain and body, so that is more like kind of, what I practice and, and I encourage people to practice. And understanding Alzheimer's and dementia is actually, I work on it too. The lot of the Buck Institute laboratories are really focused on trying to understand more because we really don't still understand a lot about what's happening. So we focus on understanding Alzheimer's more on Alzheimer's, and if ever we can, and I'm sure we will, to find a cure for it. Okay, so moving on. So these are the learning objectives for today. We are going to compare Alzheimer's and dementia and understand the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia, recognize how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain, list the risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, identify the stages of the disease, recognize current FDA approved treatments, and then describe how scientists are working to advance the research. And then, of course, at the end, we'll talk a little bit about this Alzheimer's Association. Okay, so to move on. So we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of Alzheimer's first. Siriana, I forgot to ask about the Siriana or hand. So we have some questionnaires here that comes up approximately how many Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's, and I don't know how would we like the audience to respond to it, or should I just directly go to the answer since it's not like a face-to-face?
I think they can maybe just type into the Q&A. I've opened it up so that everybody can see answers, so we can get a good census that way. I do.
Okay, if you want to do that, yeah, and then get a sense, and then of course I'll point out to the right answer.
Yeah, thank you, Pamela. She just said just answer. So I'm like, I love that. Thank you. We're good. Yeah, I think that'll be good.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so then the answer to this is more than 6 million. So more than 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's right now. Barring the development of medical breakthrough to prevent, slow, or even cure Alzheimer's disease, the number is projected to reach nearly 13 million by 2050. Worldwide, an estimated 15 million people are currently living with dementia. And I think the reason more is because, we are just living longer and longer, right? And as you'll see later, and as our studies shows also, aging is one of the main factors, which I'm going to talk to you later about. Aging is one of the major factors of different diseases, and also a lot of this neurodegenerative disease, of which Alzheimer's is one. On to our next question about how many Americans provide unpaid care for people living with Alzheimer's or with dementia. If anyone has an answer to that.
Sorry, there was a 11 mil from Catherine in the Q&A.
Yes, Catherine, you're right. It is over 11 million. Yes. So over 11 million Americans provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's or with dementia. So more than 80% of the care provided at home is delivered by family members, friends, or other unpaid caregivers. Over half of employed caregivers report having to go in late, take time off, or quit altogether due to caregiving demands. These caregivers provide approximately 15.3 billion hours of care last year, valued at nearly 257 million. So as we can see, this disease takes, it's not only the person who has Alzheimer's or suffering, it just takes a toll on the whole family, right? Because sometimes you have to miss your job, so because you have to miss your hours, your pay might go down. So in general, it just takes a toll on the whole family. Okay, so now knowing some of the facts about Alzheimer's. Okay, so now we are going to kind of talk about Alzheimer's and dementia. Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process. Again, a question for the audience, is it true or is it false?
We have a couple of falses in the chat right now.
Okay. Okay, excellent. So the answer, okay, the answer is false. Yeah. Oops. I tried to open the Q&A and now it's not going away. Can you guys don't see my screen, right?
We can still see it, yeah.
But it says everyone in this webinar can see open questions, and not that part is not going away for me.
Okay, there should be a...
Oh, hang on, I got it.
Okay, great.
Okay. So Alzheimer's is not a normal part of the aging. Okay, so yes, so because, if that was the case, then everyone would have, as we age, we know what happens is we forget little things here and there, right? But if Alzheimer's was a normal part of the aging, then everyone would have gotten Alzheimer's disease as we age. But we know that that is not the case. Not everyone gets Alzheimer's as we age. So the answer is false. So it's a brain disease that causes problems with memory, thinking, and behavior. And as we look at the brain, we'll see like the brain is actually has this tons of like nerve cells called neurons, and there are this electrochemical signals that flow through these nerve cells, and that actually helps in forming our memories, our thoughts. In Alzheimer's disease, what happens is these nerve cells kind of die, and as the disease progresses, more and more cells die, and it affects your everyday living. People younger than age 65 can get Alzheimer's. True or false?
I see a couple of trues in the chat or in the Q&A. Trues, a lot of trues. We had a lot of trues here.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Yes, it is true. It is rare. It is very rare that people under 65 get Alzheimer's, but it's not that you won't get it. It's known as the young onset of it. And there are some people kind of know the reason of it. And it's like a very, very low percent though, that gets it below the age of 65. Okay. All right, moving on. Let's hear from Dr. Snyder what she has to say about Alzheimer's and dementia.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
So we heard from Dr. Snyder about the 4 types of dementia, and there is actually more to that. But if you kind of look over here, there is a huge list of that kind of all different types. Not all of them have a proper diagnosis, but the main 4 categories are Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, dementia with Lewy body, and the frontal temporal dementia, of which, again, Alzheimer's is the more common form of the dementia. And like I said, it's not really, I don't think there is like a real segregation between what happens to each kind, but there is some kind of a demarcation between each of them. Like for Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia, they have a memory and communication problem. With the frontal temporal dementia, there's a change in personality, and the earlier you get diagnosed, the better it is. I think what I was reading is it helps a person to kind of live on their own for a longer time, because I think you come to an acceptance about it, and you can live longer on your own for a longer time, basically. And then also we'll hear from someone here who talks about how it is important to know. Okay, let's see, go back. Sorry, I wanted here to get the slide. I shouldn't have. Siriana, my screen just went really big, right?
Yes, it did. I see that.
So I think I shouldn't have done that. This is, sorry, everyone.
I think if you click F11, it'll revert back to the web. It'll shrink the screen.
F11.
One of the function buttons at the top.
You mean for the Zoom?
No, at the top of your keyboard. Yeah, if you press F11 at the top of your keyboard, it exits the full screen. Your keyboard. F11.
Not doing it.
It's not doing it.
Deepa, try hitting, just try to escape. And so hit the ESC and see if it will take you
I
out.
know that usually it does that. See, this is why I don't like this one. I think the PowerPoint is so much better. Sorry.
Again, technology is fickle. We can't control it.
Okay, maybe what I'll do is maybe should I just stop sharing and then come back? And then you know what? I'll not go to the big, I won't go to the big screen mode. I'll just keep
Okay.
it small. Okay.
Why don't we try that?
All right. Sorry, everyone. I'll be back, right back.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
But
there we go.
what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep it here and not make it big screen.
That sounds perfect.
Sorry, everyone.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
Okay, so I'm sorry about all this technology. So basically, so as I said before, that like there are like these 4 types of dementia that Dr. Snyder talks about, and you know, an accurate diagnosis, an early diagnosis is really important for Alzheimer's. And also, like I said, that you know, each of them have some kind of a characteristics of their own, but most of the times they kind of overlap. But why is an accurate diagnosis important?
Certainly, having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. You know, it explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
So for a recap of this section that we just listened to, dementia is a general term for a collection of symptoms that are severe enough to interfere with daily life. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia, and Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. It's a progressive brain disease. So before we move on to the next section about understanding the brain, if there's any questions, and I'm happy to take the questions.
We do have one question in the Q&A from Catherine. What is the average age people are diagnosed with Alzheimer's?
So Catherine, I think it's mostly, like we said, over the age of 65, but there are some early cases. So, you know, I volunteered at this Muirwood Memory Care Center, and mostly all of them, there was one lady I saw who was like, you know, she came at early 50, 55. And when I talked to them, they all said that they're almost everyone is around 65, 70 years old. So that's the age kind of you detect mostly. Okay.
I think
So
that's it
move
for
on.
now. Yeah.
Okay, move on. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to just Alzheimer's, because you know it's a brain, it affects the brain, right? So most of these neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, Huntington's disease, Alzheimer's, and it's all kind of in the brain, and that's why it's called there is this degradation of the neurons in the brain. And so that's why most of these diseases are actually known as neurodegenerative diseases. So let's look at this, the Alzheimer's in the brain.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we now call the formation of plaques and tangles. Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and impacts memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to brain tissue loss and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's, such as memory loss, behavioral issues, problems with thinking, planning, and at the end stage, swallowing.
So what we heard from the video from this, more than 100 years ago, Dr. Alois as Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, the formation of plaques and tangles, and a little bit more about the plaques and tangles I would like to add is plaques and tangles are the ones that, that's mostly the ones that we all study actually. The plaques are actually formed outside the nerve cells, and is caused by the deposition of a protein called A beta. It's a small little protein that kind of aggregates and forms these plaques. And the tangles are actually formed by another protein called the tau protein. And that's actually in the neurons. They form this kind of structures, and this is known as the tau tangle protein. So together in a brain of an Alzheimer's patients, mostly you'll see these plaques and tangles. But then to add to that is, there are cases where a patient's brain has a lots of plaques and tangles, but they do not have Alzheimer's. But certainly the most number of people who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's do have plaques and tangles. So what happens is when these plaques and tangles, they form, so this causes the nerve cells to die. It causes a shrinkage of the brain, and then progressively, because the brain cells are so important for our memory, thinking, and all these connections, and that eventually with the shrinkage of the brain, it affects your everyday life and you lose your memory. That's the first thing that happens. The brain change results in changes in memory, thinking, and behavior. Okay, I can take a few questions here too, if anyone has any questions.
Waiting to see if anybody types any questions into the chat. Yes, we have one from Catherine. How are plaques and tangles visible to doctors?
How are what? Plaques and tangles, what?
Plaques and tangles visible to doctors.
Oh, they have the scanning method. Yeah, they have the scans. You can do the scan. So there's something called the PET, I think, method, and the brain in the brain, and the doctors can see the plaques. Yes. So there is a scanning method.
I think that was it for this section.
Okay, so now we're going to look a little bit of the risk factors. What is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? Is this the genetics, the family history, or is it aging?
We have one for age. We have one for genetics.
And the right answer is age.
Okay, and we had another one for age. So age one.
So basically what the greatest known is, like, all of these are there. Of course, genetics plays a part, family history plays a role, but the aging is the #1 cause for Alzheimer's disease. And that, just like I was saying, when I present for the Buck Institute, So now when I think my first slide is kind of like I put aging in the center and I draw arrows from aging all around, kind of showing that, how lots of diseases, like even cancer, which you can get at an early age, the chances of getting cancer when you get older is more. So basically, all these diseases kind of is linked to aging. And as we are living longer and longer, we kind of are really seeing more and more about this disease. So that's why at the Buck Institute, we are so focused on kind of not really increasing the lifespan, because it's like, there is no point in living like to 80, 90, or when people live up to 100 years, but have a poor health span. So the focus of our studies is like, how do we kind of delay these diseases or not have these diseases and increase the health span of people? Because aging is the #1 risk factor.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are 2 categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
So we heard from Dr. Snyder about the risks, about the things like, she talked about. So genetics is there, age being the #1 factor, but again, we have genetics and family history too. So for genetics is like, I don't know if you guys have seen that movie called Still Alice. It's a beautiful movie. It's on Alzheimer's. So there is one gene called ApoE4. Like if you have 2 copies of the gene ApoE4, then you are more susceptible to having Alzheimer's. Those are but it's not that if you have ApoE4, you're going to get the disease, and so that's why it's known as a risk gene. Whereas for a deterministic gene, what happens is like you have a mutation in the gene, and and those are the ones that trigger the early onset of Alzheimer's. And there's a high chance that if you have a mutation in one of, there are like 3 genes actually. So if you have a mutation in one of those, there's a high chance that you will probably get Alzheimer's. And then of course aging. And so, okay, let's look at the populations at a higher risk. Hispanics are about 1.5 times as likely as whites to develop Alzheimer's and other dementia. African Americans are about twice as likely to develop the disease as whites. And these are all statistical data that people have collected, but do we really know why this is happening? No, we still don't know. Why is there such a big difference? It could be that African Americans have more of a vascular diseases, and that could be the chance that they have a more chance of having Alzheimer's. And almost 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women, and not only Americans. In general, it is that more women have Alzheimer's than men. And we do not know the reason for that. One could be that women usually live longer than men. And the other one, a very, very recent paper has been published, I think early this month, in the prestigious Journal of Nature, where they kind of talk about some reproductive hormones. It's called, I think, a follicle stimulating hormone, which actually, if you have more of that, then you could have Alzheimer's. and then I think, of course, but the study has been done only in mice, so it has to be translated to see if really that hormone is responsible for women having more of this, more of Alzheimer's. Okay. So a recap of the risk factors. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's, and individuals' risk for developing the disease increases at age 65. Family history is also known as a risk factor. Having a parent or sibling with the disease increases an individual's risk. So I just want to mention here, there's a difference between genetics and family history. Genetics means genes that you kind of inherit, and family history, I think, is also the genetics and also like the environment and other things that come into play for the family. So it's like, so they're a little different from genetics. The risk genes and deterministic genes that I talked to you about are the two types of genes associated with Alzheimer's. Hispanics, African Americans, and women are at an increased risk for Alzheimer's. I can take some questions here.
We do have a few in the Q&A. You answered one just now from Lori. What is the difference between genetics and family history? So you already did that one. And then Catherine has two questions. Is a PET scan an expected component for making every Alzheimer's diagnosis?
I don't think so. I think the first time when you're kind of experiencing anything with Alzheimer's, I mean, like first thing is, of course, you forget things. You forget kind of the words, and we will listen more to it right after this. But then what happens is you go to the doctor has they'll do a lot of tests, because you think you're forgetting stuff, but sometimes even as we grow older, we tend to take more medicines, and sometimes those can cause a temporary dementia too. So the doctor will do a lot of tests, ask you to come back, and then a lot of memory tests and all that, and then eventually they'll go back and do those testings to see the formation of plaques.
Great. And then her second question is, what percentage of the population over age 65 have Alzheimer's?
So Catherine, the first thing that we talked about, as far as I know, that about 6 million Americans right now have it. And I would say most of them come under that category, because below 65, I don't think many people have Alzheimer's.
I think her question was the percentage of people over 65 have it, like versus the percentage of people who don't have it versus people who
below
do.
65 would be maybe I would say like 5. I don't know, but the number is so less. So I wouldn't go beyond like 5% or 3%. That's what I think, Catherine. So I'm not very sure on that, because I just know that it's a very, very high percent about the age of 65.
There's a higher, so the question is, what percentage of the population over age 65 has Alzheimer's? So it's a high, like, versus, so people who do have Alzheimer's, people who are over age 65 that do have Alzheimer's versus people who do not have Alzheimer's over age 65, not the below. Does that make sense?
Okay. So is this like how many people would have? So I don't know the exact answer though. So I know I can't get your answer. So you're saying that how is 65 who don't have versus who have? Okay, no, I don't. I can look it up for you right now. I think that would come from let's see, what percent? So it doesn't, I just Googled. It said, and it's the same answer. An estimated 6.5 million Americans aged 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's in 2022. 73% are age 75 or older. About one in nine age 65 and older, 10.7% has Alzheimer's. I guess that's the answer. I think, Catherine, you're looking
I think that
for,
sounds that's how I read the answer. So hopefully that's
about 1 in 9 age 60. I think that's it. About 1 in 9 age 65 and older has Alzheimer's. Almost 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. And this is actually, I read it from the Alzheimer's Association website.
So that should be right.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you.
So the different stages of Alzheimer's disease. Before we move forward with that, what does living with Alzheimer's? I'm going to play a few videos. This is actually from people who are basically in the early stage of the disease, because symptoms do worsen over time. And however, we have to remember that the progression of the disease is very different for every person. On average, a person with Alzheimer's lives 4 to 8 years after diagnosis, but can live as long as 20 years.
It's a different kind of forgetting. It really, really is. It's not just forgetting where I put my car keys. It's much deeper than that. And for example, I cannot read a book. I used to be a voracious reader because by the time I turn a page, I have forgotten what I had read. And if you're reading a novel, you have to know what transpired before in order for you to continue to read on. And so I can't read a novel, so I've even stopped trying.
Math, I can't do a simple tip anymore. I sit there, I stare at it. It's crazy what numbers I can't deal with anymore. And in some ways, that's the disease to me. The other thing that I've increasingly been struggling with are words, which I've dealt with words my entire life, as an avid reader, as a reporter, as a writer. I struggle with them now.
I'm like an overachiever. And when you're unable to deliver or you're not performing at the same pace that you once did before, that's frustrating. It's frustrating to not know where you place things. It's frustrating to not be able to explain to someone the problems that you're having. You can't articulate it in a way. It's frustrating to read something and you forgot what you read. It's frustrating to continuously have to change your password and you just changed it last week and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over again.
I think the thing that surprises me the most about my dementia is that it is progressive. And I'm finding that I'm forgetting more. And they do memory tests for me all the time at the doctor's. And so that becomes a little disconcerting at times, to see my cognitive impairment continue to decline. But again, I really have hope. I don't live really in the future. I can't live in the future. I can't worry about what the future is going to bring. I have to live for today.
So these are individuals we just heard from are living in the early stage of the disease. So this slide actually shows you the Alzheimer's disease is how it progresses. So the first part is basically asymptomatic. That is, you really don't have any symptoms. And at this stage, it starts probably sometimes maybe very early. And I don't think there is any way you can even say that there is some changes happening to the brain. Then there is this mild cognitive decline due to Alzheimer's disease. It's still like, maybe you kind of yourself recognize it, or people who are with you all the time kind of recognize it, that you're kind of slowly forgetting things, but nothing people from outside probably will not even be aware of it. So that's the, like, MCI stands for mild cognitive impairment. So that's how it is. And then slowly it kind of really progresses. And then the dementia due to Alzheimer's disease. And then it's the mild, typically involves symptoms that interfere with some daily activities. Then it kind of, as it progresses, it's more pronounced symptoms that interfere with many daily activities. And the last is the severe form is, it's kind of, you cannot kind of probably do anything much basically of your daily activities, and you have to have someone help you all the time. So this is how the disease slowly progresses. So the three broad phases of the disease are asymptomatic, MCI, mild cognitive impairment, and then the dementia due to Alzheimer's. The dementia phase is further broken down into 3 stages of the mild, moderate, and severe. And to kind of, it's very true that no 2 individuals has the same kind of symptoms. And, it's not, that's basically, we cannot generalize it. And while symptoms worsen over time, people progress through stages at different stages as their abilities change. Any questions on this section?
If anyone has any questions on this section, please type them into the Q&A. I think we're good. So
next we are going to move into the FDA approved treatments, and sadly enough, like, whatever treatments we have until now is just kind of slowing down the symptoms and kind of maybe stabilizing the symptoms. There's so much research going on, but unfortunately we still do not really have a cure for the disease. But at least let's see where we are with it right now. So most of the current available therapies do not modify or slow disease. They only treat the symptoms. And that is why, people are coming up with this, like, if you have been to my Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body talk, I kind of talked about all the things that, we could do kind of to maybe postpone it or kind of delay the onset of the disease, doing like cognitive activity and all, because the brain is the one that's getting affected, and new cognitive activity always helps in making new brain connections and keeping the nerve cells alive. So as you see, these are all these symptoms that are there, and I mean all the medicines that has been approved by the FDA, and it's not only treating, they just treat the symptoms. Like, you see some of them like has a chronic, there's like sometimes Alzheimer's is also associated sometimes with a chronic inflammation, this thing with the immune system, a failure with the immune system, or there could be other, like there's some molecule called glutamate, which is kind of activated. So all of them kind of trying to kind of address those symptoms. 2021 is the one that we had, I think it was June, there was an accelerated approval by FDA of this drug called Aduhelm, and then it's the first one that actually targets the A beta. So it's an antibody against the A beta protein that is found in the plaque. So that's the first one that is directly treating it. There has been so many trials of A beta, but almost all of them have failed. So this was the first one. But even if this is, it's still not very popular, because this drug does have some side effects, and some places like Duke University and all, they have kind of withdrawn it and not given it to the patients. Because when I say it was an accelerated FDA approval, it was like before the clinical trials were really completed. It was out in the market, and a lot of FDA members also did not support it, but I guess it was still out, and we have to still see how this drug does with people. But again, it's for really at the early onset, when if you have this, then it might help. So because everyone experiences Alzheimer's differently, these treatments work in varying degrees and are not effective for everyone. We encourage people who are interested in learning more about treatments to have a conversation with their healthcare provider, which is, of course, very, very important. The first thing is kind of, if you are having any issues with, I think the first thing that fails is the memory. If you are having any issues, to immediately contact your healthcare provider and go from there. So advancing Alzheimer's research. So we are going to look a little bit about the research that's being done.
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease is a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
So this is what, what Dr. Snyder says, what is very important is diagnosing it early, right? So, we are looking at is when already A beta has formed plaques, the tau has formed tangles. And from our studies, even in our lab, we study the A beta protein. And, even from our studies, we see, and it's not only the A beta forming the plaques, the A beta forms the plaques, but at the same time, when this protein aggregates and forms the plaques, it kind of brings down with it other important proteins too, which has not even been studied. So slowly they are kind of looking into other proteins, like there are studies that show that besides A beta, there are also other proteins that might affect it. So if we could kind of find an early intervention, diagnose it at early, that would be really, really helpful. And of course, labs all around the world are focusing on that. In the US, the National Institute of Aging has been like giving so much money right now there are like this exclusive grants that are being that the NIH is funding, the NIA is funding just for working on Alzheimer's disease.
Growing evidence indicates that people can reduce their risk of cognitive decline by adopting key lifestyle habits. More and more research shows that factors like exercise, nutrition, and aggressive management of cardiovascular risk factors may impact our ability to slow cognitive decline as we age. And through current studies, we're exploring how certain lifestyle factors may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's and dementia.
So this is something that I talked in my Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body: exercise, diet and nutrition, cognitive activity, and social connection. It's just a healthy way of living life, and that might really, really help and kind of delaying Alzheimer's or not having Alzheimer's.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day, and I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
It's nice to see the association spearheading in many ways the emphasis on getting the money at the federal level and at the private sector to get the research done so that someday there will be an effective treatment, hopefully cure, hopefully prevention.
Okay. So clinical studies are key to advancing the Alzheimer's research. We need to get, clinical studies in people who are suffering from Alzheimer's, kind of from different populations, and kind of it has to be kind of a very diverse population to really, really understand the disease better. Look at those patients, and also lots of laboratory research like what we are conducting right now.
Participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
You might hear the phrase negative trial, which means it didn't hit the endpoint. it didn't result in an FDA approved treatment for the disease. But I think the only negative trial is one that doesn't provide us with valuable information. If the trial is well designed and is a good scientific experiment, we can get extremely valuable data that can help plan the next trial and make it even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even prevention. By participating in clinical research, you can move us toward methods of treatment and prevention for all those affected by this devastating disease. Alzheimer's Association Trial Match is a free clinical studies matching service for those with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers. To start, simply create a confidential user profile and receive a list of studies that may be a match for you. Don't just hope for a cure, help us find one.
Yeah, so I think it's this what was said in the video is correct. Like, we all have to participate. We all have to see how we can find a cure for this disease. So scientists have increased their understanding of Alzheimer's significantly over the past decade because there's so much funding for this Alzheimer's right now, and we all are trying to kind of achieve and kind of at least move it a little forward in our understanding of Alzheimer's, and if there's something and if we can cure it. People living with dementia, caregivers, and healthy volunteers without dementia are needed for clinical studies in order to find methods of prevention, treatment, and ultimately a cure. Both drug and non-drug studies are taking place across the country and online. Yes, there are really like clinics also that do not focus on drugs, but there are clinics that only focus on lifestyle and kind of lifestyle changes, and also kind of different kinds of supplements that can help in kind of delaying the disease, or even if you have Alzheimer's, kind of maybe slow down the progression. Trial Match is a free clinical study matching service. If there are any questions I can take here, and the next I'm going to just talk briefly about the Alzheimer's Association. So if you have any questions on all this presentation, I would be happy to take it and answer it.
Are there any questions for right now? We can also do a little, if you want to continue typing questions out.
Yeah, maybe let me continue, but there's not. This one is just, I'm talking about the Alzheimer's Association. So the Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementia. The alz.org is a very powerful website, and there's like you can contact them 24 hours. It's a 7/24. And there are lots of things that they are involved, and the website is really fantastic website. You can go to alz.org and get a lot of information on the phone, like I said, 24/7 helpline. And then there are different ways in which you can also join the fight against Alzheimer's. You can either volunteer, just like I'm a volunteer with Alzheimer's Association. Advocacy is kind of spread the word, participate in Trial Match, and then Walk to End Alzheimer's is the biggest fundraising day for Alzheimer's. It's held annually in more than 600 communities. The Alzheimer's Association Walk to End is the world's largest fundraiser to fight the disease. And then we also have something called the longest day. On the longest, the day with the most light, the summer solstice raise funds and awareness for the care, support, and research efforts of the Alzheimer's Association. So basically, we are all into this fight together, and we just do our part in kind of, how we can advance the research, what we can do, and like the aim of the Alzheimer's Association, how can we kind of come to a point when, there are much lower cases of this Alzheimer's. Just like, if we really think of cancer, right? At one point, like I think so many people used to die of cancer, but now I really feel that, we hear about cancer, but it's still, I think we can control it. We can have a quality life. So my hope is that definitely we will come to a world when we will see less and less of Alzheimer's disease. Okay, I'm happy to take questions. That's about my presentation.
Does anyone have any questions? You can type them into the Q&A. You can also raise your hand and I can try and unmute you and we can do this live. I see no questions, so I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you to recording people.